Are you ready to take your homeschooling up a notch? Fine-tuning your homeschool day takes no time, but just a little bit of effort. Today, I'm going to share how to balance and structure your day with flexible alternatives.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Moms Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Hey friends, and welcome back to Vintage Homeschool Moms. My name is Felice Gerwitz, and today we're tackling the topic of fine-tuning your homeschool day, balancing structure and flexibility. Now that's a mouthful. This is episode 566, and you can find today's show notes at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com.
When it comes to learning difficulties like dyslexia, lasting change starts with the right approach. At the Morris Center, we go beyond traditional tutoring, offering comprehensive, evidence-based programs that retrain the brain for lifelong success. With over 35 years of experience, we've helped thousands of clients overcome learning challenges in just months, not years. Find out how we can help your child succeed at themorriscenter.com.
Well, if you listened to the last episode, A Great Start to Your Homeschool Day, I felt like we needed to add a little bit more, and I didn't want last time's episode to be so long. So we're diving deeper into creating a homeschool pace that works for your family. Listen, we're all different, and I can describe for you the perfect homeschool day that would work for me, yet not for you. So since we can't sit across the table from each other and talk, this is the next best thing. I can make some suggestions, and you can say, "Hey, Felice, that's a great idea," or "No, thanks, that's not going to work for us." So you can take what you can and leave the rest, and no guilt here at all. Before we get really into it, I want to share our sponsor with you, and that is Now Programs. That's NOWPROGRAMS.com. You can visit them on their website, and if you have a struggling learner, you'll want to pick up the phone and call these people. They are amazing and work with you with all budgets and really can help you with your struggling learner. All right, now, in homeschooling, there's no one size fits all or even most. Homeschooling is pretty much tailored to your child, your family, and your specific needs. And I get it. In large homeschool families, this idea may not be so child-specific, but it definitely is going to be grade-specific. You're not going to expect your kindergartner to tackle college algebra, right? But you can still get through your day with some semblance of order and end the day feeling happier for it. I am a person that likes to accomplish a lot, and I would feel some days that we did absolutely nothing. And at the end of the year, when I used to get all my evaluation stuff together, I was always astounded at how much we accomplished. So take heart, don't think you're not accomplishing anything, and kind of keep track a little bit and analyze as you're going along, so you're not like me at the end of the year thinking, "Oh gosh, I did such a horrible job," and instead it really was great. So the first thing to do is analyze how you feel at the end of the day. Does your day feel chaotic or overly rigid or maybe packed to the brim? Of course, all of our days are packed to the brim. We're homeschoolers, right? But more than that, I want you to look at it and say, is this sustainable? Because we're not going to continue homeschooling if we feel like we're really going on this up-road struggle. And so homeschooling can be enjoyable, and there are many joy-filled homeschool days. It's not just, ordeals every single day. So with some years of tweaking my homeschool days, I developed a method that worked for us, and that's what I want to share with you today, how to find what works for you. So there's some principle and practical strategies that I think will help you blend your routines, your schedules, and a positive mindset. Because if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And I hate the word ain't, but you get the picture. So we want our days that are going to pretty much flow smoothly. And basically, you have to have a plan, because if you don't, it's going to be really difficult. We can only hope and pray that we're happy at the end of the day, but there really is a little bit of work that you need to do to get us to that point. If you had a chance to listen to last week's episode, then this pretty much is a sequel. If not, you may want to stop this audio and go listen to A Great Start to Your Homeschool. In that episode 565, I included a homeschool self-evaluation quiz so you could get a handle on where you need some work and where you're doing a great job. I also wanted to provide some ideas on how to adapt to challenges and utilize some inexpensive tools in this podcast that is going to help you to prioritize downtime and to keep your family learning and not overwhelmed. So if you haven't started your homeschooling year, or you're in the middle of it, or maybe you just found this episode, no worries. I believe that every day can be a fresh start to shape the type of homeschool experience that reflects your values and your kids' needs. So in last week's episode, we had 20 questions that were true or false, and that helped you identify whether your day was chaotic, scheduled, routine-based, rigid, or overscheduled, or maybe it was working well. From there, we are going to go into some actionable steps to fine-tune your approach, and this will hopefully help you a little bit more. Why does fine-tuning matter? Well, every homeschool family is unique, and as I said, one size doesn't fit all. But when we fine-tune our day, that means we're going to find a balance between structure and flexibility that is helpful to your family. I had a friend, and my daughter's done this in the past, that homeschooled all year round. Now, my daughter doesn't do that as much anymore, although her schedule is a little bit different than most schedules, because she starts in the summer, because here in Florida, it is very hot in the summer. And so the kids want to be indoors for part of the day anyway, so she uses that time to start her school day, her school year early. And in that way, she can take off time when the weather's cooler and plan some family trips and things like that. So you can do whatever you want in that way. But I did have a lady I knew that homeschooled year-round all the time, and her kids tended to finish school early, as graduated from high school early, and that was really her goal. And so if that suits you, then you're going to be more of a scheduled and focused person in that way. And for me, I enjoyed the flexibility and really getting to enjoy some of what homeschool offers, and that is the ability to go on field trips, the ability to explore things that the children are interested in, and just basically to live our lives as a family, making those memories. In our last episode, we discussed how your attitude is so important in shaping your day, and how routines and schedules and checklists can provide stability, but not be overwhelming. So today we're taking it a step further by helping you refine your day-based, based on your quizzes, or if you haven't listened to that episode, that's fine, and just bear with us. So we're going to figure out what works for you and how you can add some changes if you would like to. A well-tuned homeschool day for me allows me to focus on what matters: learning, family connection, and faith, without feeling overwhelmed. So after you've analyzed your quiz results, you can look at these types of things. So here's what each one of them means. Like if you had a chaotic day, that means you started school late, you skipped subjects, or there were unpredictable mornings that lacked structure, leading to frustration. If you had scheduled days, that meant you had a fixed timetable for subjects, and that provided predictability, but it may feel too restrictive or too rigid. If you had a routine-based day, that meant you had consistent habits like morning chores, read alouds, and that allowed you to have some flow without super strict timing. And that kind of describes part of my day. If you had a rigid day, that meant you were sticking to a plan despite interruptions that could stifle spontaneity and teachable moments. And maybe you're like, Felice, I like my rigid day because then I know we're going to get done. And I'm going to say, wonderful, keep at it. And you can rename this rigid day to perfect day for my family. And then overscheduled day, where there are too many activities that exhaust everyone, leaving no room for rest or play. And then the working well day, a balanced, productive, and joyful day means you're on the right track. All right, so listen, a working well day can be a rigid day or an overly scheduled day if that makes you and your kids happy. So go with what works best for you. However, when you review your quiz answers, you may note one or two areas that you'd like to improve on. For example, a chaotic day needs a morning routine, while an overscheduled day may require cutting some non-essentials. So you can use the following to help you. So how do you blend routines and schedules? Well, the key to a great homeschool day is mixing it up for me. I tried blending some routines for some flexibility with schedules for accountability. Routines create consistent habits without being tied to the clock, while schedules ensure academic progress. So at the end of the year, you've got that progress report that you can hand in. If you have evaluations or if your kids are taking standardized tests, you can at least keep that progress so that you can show your kids year by year how they're doing and progressing. So we usually had a morning routine. We started with about 10 minutes of family time. We prayed, we reviewed our goals for the day. For example, if somebody had sports or we had some other activity we were going to do. And then after that, we had breakfast with one of the children, asking them to share, one thing at a time. So after, while we were having breakfast, the kids would share some fun things that they had done or something they wanted to accomplish after they finished their schoolwork. And not only did this set a positive tone, but it also set a goal. My kids didn't like to go, keep doing their schoolwork late in the afternoon. They had a goal for being done around noon. And as they got older, that time had to be stretched on because there was no way they could finish all of their subjects in that amount of time. So sometimes we would tweak the days so that sometimes they'd have to finish on a Saturday morning, or sometimes they'd have to, work a little bit longer. But at least they had a goal and a focus of what they wanted to get done as they got older. When they were younger, it was up to mom, and that's where, I had time blocks for essentials, like after breakfast, we started math from 9 to 9:45, and then we had reading after that. And we kept our blocks short from 30 to 45 minutes for younger kids, and sometimes an hour or more for older kids, especially if it took them longer to do their math. And for my kids, they wanted to do their math first after we did Bible study or whatever we were going to do together as a family. Some people like to read to their kids while their kids are eating breakfast. So that's a really good idea. And then that way, while they're quiet and eating, you can get some of your school started. I really like the idea of flexible routines. You can incorporate habits like, having a quiet time after lunch or doing some art projects. So that's something that the children enjoy. My grandkids really love to paint and do things like that, and that's something my daughter can't get to. So they do this at grandma's house. So if you have a mom or a dad or someone who's creative that can help out with the kids, or even exchanging those kinds of things with a friend, you might be good at baking. And so you take the kids and work with them, not daily, obviously, but, in a co-op situation, or even, in some sort of exchange, maybe once a week or twice a month. That helps to balance out the routine, and it gives the kids something to look forward to. But having flexible routines allows you to have some predictability, but it gives you some flux where you can incorporate some things that the children may enjoy. My kids like to know what was happening each day, so that was one of the reasons we incorporated checklists. We had grade appropriate checklists, and we were able to track daily and weekly goals, and that gave the kids a sense of autonomy, that they were able to keep track of their own things. And then at the end of the week, they had to show us their lists. Of course, I kept track, because otherwise you're going to have a kid who is not doing any of their math, especially if you're letting them check their answers themselves. I highly don't recommend that, because you're going to find yourself mid-year where the kids have been skipping lessons or filling in the blanks with the answer key. So that was something that I wanted to do with them. If they wanted to check it, fine, but they had to be sitting with me. And I wanted my kids to be as self-sufficient as they could. And that meant that if I got distracted or busy, never answer emails in the morning, especially if you own your own business like I do, because you can get sucked into that email vortex. But then the kids could keep doing their schoolwork and accomplish their goals if you got sidetracked. When I homeschool, we use schedules for academics, but routines for chores and family time. And if a subject ran long, we'd just adjust it with non-academic routines, like we would delay reading books that we were planning to read, or we would take a shorter lunch. And this balance kept us on track without feeling overwhelmed or a slave to our schedule. What about adapting to challenges? And homeschool days are unpredictable. Someone's sick, there's, mega spills, there's arguments, kids are not getting along, or somebody decides to talk about the stars in the middle of a math lesson. So how do you adapt without losing momentum? And also, how do you keep your kids interested in what they're learning? So I would have some buffers in for, interruptions. 10 to 15 minutes is really not going to be that much time if you have a little one, but as much as you can, add some buffers in, whatever works for you. And those teachable moments. If a kid asks about the stars or the planets or stargazing during a math lesson, you can very quickly talk about it and say, hey, let's talk about this later, or at dinner time, or maybe let's walk outside in the evening and see what stars we can see. That at least, allows them to know that, we're not going to derail mom, although I will admit that they did derail me often. But, you're obviously not going to go run outside during the day or pull out an app that has the stars on it in the middle of math when you need to get that done. So work on those kinds of things. Some of you are unschoolers and you're going, well, of course we're going to do that, Felice. It's child-led. And I'm going to say, that's wonderful if you can do it. That just was not me. So again, as I started this podcast, make sure that the day works for you and your family and not what I think is the ideal day. What about energy management? And for us, it was scheduling those high energy subjects where it's going to take a lot of brain power, like math in the morning, and the lighter ones in the afternoon, which could be reading or even history. Or maybe some discussions, or the kids were going to give an impromptu, short speech on a topic. So the afternoon energy, kind of matched the level of after lunch. Everybody's fresh in the morning, but after lunch, there's this noticeable decline. So that's where, you may want to have the kids go outside if you have a trampoline and jump on the trampoline or run around. But what I always found when I did things like that, even when they were younger, it was really hard to bring them back and corral them in. So I tried to schedule activities that were not so brain intense. And then your mindset. What disruptions are going to frustrate you, and which ones are you going to say, okay, we're just going to be calm here and we're just going to continue on. So I know many times I would just close my eyes and say something like, thank you, Jesus, and please help us. Or thank you, Jesus, for giving me all these wonderful children. And then we'd fix the issue and move on. I cannot emphasize how important your attitude is, because it becomes contagious. I didn't realize I said, alrighty then, so many times until my kids started repeating it and saying it as well. And I'm thinking, gosh, That's annoying. And then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I say. So, be aware of that and consider that as well. For chaotic days, start with one routine, like a consistent wake up time. And on rigid days, allow one time block to be flexible for spontaneous learning. So these adjustments can change as you need them to, and it's enough to keep the kids engaged while also making your children who like to be scheduled happy. And I really had some of those that just had to know the next day what we were going to do. Wonderful tools are planners and checklists, but if they are overwhelming and they're not going to work for you, do not use them. And I have some, daily checklists at the MediaAngels.com store. I created these at one point because I wanted something that was going to be flexible, yet I wanted it to go with each month, because each month there are so many fun things, especially when the children are younger, things that you can do. And so these templates are available, and you can just print them out and use them. Kids love checking off tasks. I don't know if your kids do, but mine did. And so sometimes I had them create their own, check off sheets. We made the grids on a computer and printed them out. And you can do them yourself. And, whatever works for you in a word processing program or on Google Docs. And, just have a Monday through Friday across the top, put their subjects on the left-hand side and some grids where they can write, the books they used or even, what pages they did, and then check them off. I used it, for the kids all the way through, and it can be as complicated or simple as you want. We also had goal sheets, and we set 3 to 5 goals per week, like complete 4 math lessons or review Fridays to celebrate and adjust for the next week. We use checkoff lists as a way for the kids to earn privileges, like they could select a movie or game night for the family to enjoy. Sometimes no one earned the privilege, and sometimes multiple children did, so we adjusted in that way. Use whatever works for your family. Our family was super competitive, so they loved the challenge. And it's really hard because some kids are just not going to do as well as others. So instead of just adjusting it down, work with the child that's having a difficult time and maybe help them with, time management. If you can do that when they're younger, they will thank you for it as an adult. Out of all of my kids, I have one out of the 5 that does not do a good job with time management at all. And as an adult, he struggles with it. So if you can work with that, with your children, I think it will be such a blessing. Use visual aids as much as you can. You can post the routines, on a kitchen whiteboard, or use apps for your family schedule to keep everybody on track. We used to use a shared Google Calendar, and I would update it with sports practices and other church events so that everyone knew what was going on in the family, and especially us parents, and we weren't surprised when there was a game coming up and we totally forgot about it. And then there is monthly reviews. Now, why do this? Because again, you're going to end up 6 months down the road and go, oh my gosh, the schedule is just not working for us. So if you can, at the end of the month, say, okay, what's working, what's not working? Are they doing the checklist? Are they not? They're not doing it. Is it scheduled too much? And then tweak it and go back and revise. And so I have other quizzes as well. These are not so much quizzes as assessments, but I did a podcast on the beginning, middle, and end of the year. And so this is called the Organized Homeschool. I put the link in the show notes. And that's an assessment for the beginning and the middle of your school year because, it's my husband comes up with these brilliant ideas of evaluating. People do it in business all the time. And then we float along sometimes and think, oh my gosh, everything's falling apart and I don't know why. And in this way, when you're evaluating and looking back at what's working and what's not, then you can figure it out. Checklists were a lifesaver in my homeschool and keeping us focused without micromanaging. They're simple yet effective for tracking progress. Best of all, they can be printed out and used as a resource for yearly evaluations at the end of the school year. And then prioritize downtime. Overscheduling can drain your family and it leaves no room for rest or connection. So we would, limit activities, as much as we could to 4 to 5 core daily tasks. For example, we'd get those main subjects done, and sometimes we would change it up with science on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then history on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The next semester, we would flip it, where history is 3 times a week and science is 2. And in that way, we were able to have bigger blocks of time and accomplish more, and also change the schedule so it wasn't overwhelming. We also scheduled breaks in, and that is, having some quiet time, whether it was mostly in the morning where the kids could, before breakfast, have some time to pray, read their Bibles, work on a journal, or do whatever they needed. Some people do it after lunch, and that's another good time to do it, for reading, naps, or if the kids just need to play a little bit. You can add some fun routines, going on nature walks or weekly game night, and that also helps. Again, a positive attitude. It's not always so easy to be positive, especially when things seem overwhelming. But if you can, pray, that always helps me. And sometimes I would just pray with the kids. And when we did, I think that it really helped them, and they would offer to pray for me if I was, stressed out. And many times, in our family group, we text each other now, even with adults, and we pray for each other. So if you're overscheduled, kind of look at it and say, okay, what can I cut out? And balance is the key. So you have to look at what works for you and what doesn't. And fine-tuning is about tailoring your day to you and your family. And you can just start with one thing. What is one thing I can improve on? Can I improve on our routine, or loosening a schedule, or maybe cutting back on activities? We homeschool moms get sucked into so many things. I think I have a podcast on just saying no, because I found out that I was in charge of this thing and that thing and the other thing because I was the only one volunteering. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this extra work and my own family is struggling and suffering because I can't homeschool because I have to prepare for co-op or whatever that was. So we did co-ops when the kids were little, but I did not do co-ops when they got older because I felt like I could do so much more with them at home than it took the energy to do it. Some people do it the opposite. They don't do co-ops when their kids are little, but they do them when they're older. So again, do what works for you. We can set the tone of our homeschool, and it is so important to look at that and say, I may need a little bit of a break. I need some downtime. And how can I do that? I had another friend who would take a week off just for planning. And she would have structured things for her children to do because then they were not so much underfoot as she was trying to plan. Or again, bring in another mom who can, do some craft or something with the kids while you're working on your stuff, and then, reciprocate back. Again, look at what works for you and what doesn't, and work on it that way. I've got some great character planners at themediaangels.com/store. That is a great way to encourage and practice good character as a family. There are fun activities and different things that you can act out as a family, or different scenarios. And again, I found out that many times we assume our kids know things that there is no way they know. And this was one way that we could discuss, things such as you're at somebody's house and they put on a video or television program or show you something on their phone that is terrible and not something you want to see. What do you do? And my kids couldn't answer that question when they were little, so it was something that I worked on in these planners and put together because we would go through these scenarios until they could answer these questions. Another question, some man comes up to you and you're playing in the driveway and he says, "There's been an accident and your dad asked me to come get you. Would you go?" And I asked my young son at the time and his friend, and they both said yes. And I said to them, "Do you really think that your dad, who was in an accident, would send some random person to come get you?" And they both said no. They had never thought about it before. So that freaked me out. And I told, my son's friend's mom, and we kind of worked with our kids on different scenarios. So these kinds of things are in this character counts planner so that you can go through with your children. And, you'd be surprised at some of the things they say and they've never really thought about. All right, friends, enough for you today. You take care. God bless. There's some other links for other podcasts that you may enjoy. And if you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. Until next time, God bless, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Moms Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.